Hey guys and girls, Bored now, back with you, and this is going to be my review of Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 8. The episode is called Jig-A-Bobo. So sorry for the delay in getting this episode recorded and out there. It does mean there will be another review quickly after it because I've kind of got a couple to make up. So this episode follows on from the cliffhanger from the previous episode with the whole time travel thing with Hippolyta, where of course the cop who is dead, who returned from the future, basically he had Diana's comic book in his pocket, because obviously in the future she's gone on to become like a successful comic book writer, and it has obviously the comic book with her name on it. So that's obviously setting up this plot where she's going to become a suspect, or she's going to become a focus for the police in the present because of what happened to the dead cops and what have you. At the same time, of course, Atticus came back through the portal. He's back in the modern time, and he kind of like shut everything down to clear away the evidence. But as of that episode, Hippolyta had not returned. She would return at a different time. It's obviously all to do with the mechanics of time travel. So at the start of this episode, Hippolyta still hasn't returned, and that plays partly into the drama because Dee takes up a lot of the focus of the episode. I wouldn't say it's like massively, not compared to, like, for example, Ruby with the body swap episode, where I'd say she took up the majority of screen time. This is fairly sort of evenly spread about the characters, but Dee does become the focus, as we kind of sort of thought she might be. And one of the things they do is they open with this funeral, and it's like a funeral procession in the streets. This kind of well-known person around the neighborhood and stuff, and they're having this emotional like funeral march for him. And I get the impression it's like that person is a real life historical figure, so they're obviously linking this to real life sort of events. And it again shows us like the segregation and the kind of racism from the police, where they're trying to shut down the march, and they're trying to just close down the streets to make it really almost impossible for them to like march through the streets and kind of celebrate this person's life and like mourning, basically. So there's a bunch of tension with that, and again, there's a real energy to like the filmmaking and stuff, where we see, you know, the segregation and almost like the battle lines being drawn. And with all the commotion, Dee ends up getting separated from them. She actually runs off. And one of the things they do with Dee in this episode and the drama is that she's upset, she's confused, and she's mad at like Atticus and Letitia because they're not telling her the truth about what happened to her mother. They're obviously trying to shield her from it, like protect her. So it's that classic sort of like story where obviously they're trying to protect the young one, but as a result, they're actually making Dee more frightened, more upset, and it's almost like Dee doesn't trust them. So they get that across really well, and the young actress playing Dee, I think, is really good as well. So, but it also leads to this logical sort of place where she's obviously going to be put in danger as a result of her just being so mad at them and just being confused and just wanting to know where her mother is and what's happened and stuff. because I can't remember exactly what they tell her, but they sort of reassure her that she's okay and that she'll be back in a few days or what have you. But obviously Dee's very, confused and mad. So, but because of that stuff, that then leads her to like going astray and running off, and it becoming this whole thing. So picking up on that, I'll talk about Atticus in a moment because there's a crucial plot point with him. But picking up on what happens to Dee is she obviously gets targeted by the sort of like the main kind of cops that we've seen in the show, the sort of racist bullying cops. They confront her in the street and start asking questions, and obviously Dee doesn't know what's going on with this stuff. She doesn't know that in the future she produces this comic book, or that it becomes a popular thing, and she doesn't know what happened with Hippolyta and the rest of it, so she's really confused. But the cops, it's an uncomfortable scene because they really muscle her and kind of force her to the ground, or at least get physical with her. But what actually happens is that they spit on her, and the spit basically curses her, that they put like some sort of a spell on her. And so again, the fact that it came through spit, it came through this kind of sort of sign, this sort of action of like racial like prejudice and that kind of thing. That's sort of very striking and fitting. But what actually happens to Dee is that she then has these like hallucinations and these dreams, and she then sees almost like a doppelganger version of herself, where she like appears in demon form, and basically it pursues her down the street. It shows up at like random places, and it's constantly with her. So it's again this idea of it's in her head, but she can't shake it. Sort of, it's like her own fears being used against her. And once again, I have to commend like the CGI stuff and the visual effects in this show, because when we see like these creatures appearing to Dee and then stalking them, it's really, really well done. They have a real presence there. They look very good and very menacing, and just the level of detail is like really impressive, and the direction is very good. Like, so there's a scene where they sort of stalk her down like a train platform, for example, and it's really menacing and edge of your seat type stuff. And I will say actually that Misha Green directs this episode. She's the main showrunner, but it's the first episode she's actually directed, so she does a really, really good job in her. I think it's the first time she's directed anything, so it's really props to her. She does a great job. But yeah, obviously Dee has this terror, this fear throughout the episode. And there's also, just thinking of the way this show has tackled different genres and kind of referenced different movies and things like that, there's definitely a Nightmare on Elm Street vibe to this episode, because at various points she hears like little girls like singing and chanting it in a similar way to that film, or they're like skipping, and yeah, definite Nightmare on Elm Street reference going on there. And I think some people would have a problem with this, but I think this show just gets the right balance where it's almost like referencing those things, but then it uses it for its own means, like it turns it into something original and exciting. So I really don't have a problem. But throughout the episode, things just escalates with Dee, and she gets more and more frightened. And it gets to the point kind of at the end of the episode where where she's come home finally, and she's just locked herself in her room, and Montrose tries to confront her and tries to talk her down, and she's just in this trance. It's just overcome her. And again, it's really, the visuals really terrifying, really creepy, because we see them kind of like just jumping into her, like I think stabbing at her or something like that, certainly attacking her, like these themes, which obviously Montrose can't see, and he's just trying to calm her down, and she eventually just is overcome and kind of collapses. So that's kind of the dramatic ending as far as Dee's concerned. So obviously pick up with that in the next episode, but the horror element in this is again really well done, but really nicely connected to the racial politics as well. So the big thing with Atticus is, of course, last week it did focus on Hippolyta and what happened to her, in the future, and this whole thing they did with her, which was really mind-blowing. But it didn't show you actually where Atticus went and what happened with him. So he reveals in this episode that he went to the future where his son has been born. His son is like grown up, and his son actually produces a book called Lovecraft Country, of course, the title of the show. And so it's kind of revealed that obviously his son has done a book based on the experiences of his father. And so we know now, obviously, that Yeti, I think it was the previous episode, it was revealed that she is pregnant. So she's obviously expecting her and Tick's baby. So I think that just draws on the parallels and the tension, because Atticus is worried about the future and putting his son through that. And obviously, I think another thing is that by going to the future, it highlights the fact that he's not there. He's no longer around. He has been killed. So I think it just brings up all this anxiety with him and Yeti. They're concerned about leaving their son behind, or Atticus leaving his son behind. So we get a small scene when Gina shows up. I'm not sure if they called her or if she. I'm assuming maybe they called her, and so she arrives. And that's quite an unusual, sort of tense scene, because obviously Yeti's in the room and she's never met her. And this is the first she's finding out about this stuff, what happened in Korea. So Atticus and Gina are sort of explaining this. But Atticus is obviously really, really upset, really anxious to find out. He tells her, tell me, when am I going to die? I need to know when, how am I going to die? And Gina sort of says, sorry, it doesn't really work like that. I can't. I only saw that you are going to die. I don't know the exact way or the exact time. Because again, there's all this stuff where if they knew that they could at least try to stop it or prepare, whatever the case may be. So, I mean, outside of the stuff with Dee, there's sort of various stuff going on. The Christina plot kind of comes back into it. There's various stuff with Ruby where she and Dee, or she tells Yeti, Letitia, what happened to her, the whole body swap thing, and obviously this makes Yeti concerned for her and a bit suspicious, and she's kind of like, well, I don't think you can really trust Christina. But Yeti does this deal with Christina because obviously they talk about this whole thing to do with Atticus and him potentially dying, and now the stuff happening with Dee, and because she's obviously now holding, or she's pregnant with Atticus's baby, she's concerned about that as well. So she makes a deal with Christina in this episode where she gives her the pages of the book, and in exchange for that, Christina gives her like immortality, like so she can't be killed by anything. So that presents a whole host of new possibilities and some meaty stuff they can do with that. But obviously Letitia has done this behind the other's back. She's like made this deal. So there's various little bits like this, and the episode ends in a big sort of set piece, really, where the cops are basically bearing down on them. They're basically opening fire on them and attacking there because of what's happened with Dee and what have you. And Dee, actually, there is one other great bit with Dee that I skipped over, which was at one point she does confront the cops, and she kind of, when they're like going after her, she like stands up to them and says, you know, something. I think it's something like "F you pigs" or something, or certainly pigs is involved in the word in the phrase, and it's just a great moment of like rebellion and fighting back. So I enjoyed that scene as well. But yeah, the episode ends with this big sort of set piece where the cops are coming after them and they're like surrounding the house and shooting at them. But then these like monsters appear, and it's like these monsters which the cops have created, sort of thing. They've created from a spell, and again, almost like disaster movie type or horror monster type B movie type stuff. And again, it looks really, really good, but they're really like intimidating. But what happens is, because they've got this spell now, which Christina helped them with, then they can block it, and they sort of like, it's like a force field. But I think it's because of like Yeti's like immune, like immortality as well. But it kind of turns around on the cops, and these creatures end up like eating the cops basically, and it's like this brutal sort of death scene. But again, it is very, very sort of satisfying. I guess there's a lot of toing and froing because it's cutting between this and the D stuff with Montrose, but there you have it, another pretty packed episode of Lovecraft Country. That's episode 8 now, so I have a couple more to review. I will be back with episode 9 soon, and we're getting close to the end of this season at least. Another, newer show I've been reviewing, I've done a couple of episodes, that is of Netflix's The Haunting of Bly Manor. I did a double review of that, which you can find on the channel now. But lots of like special live streams and horror reviews coming up over the next month, since it is the spooky season. But yeah, like and subscribe if you want to support the channel, help this stuff to keep it going. If you want to ding the bell on YouTube, that should give you like notification for when a new video goes up or when I'm live on the channel. And yeah, catch me up on Twitter and the rest of it if you want to get in contact. But thanks for listening, and goodbye.